We're going to look at the decisions aspect of our management system. What that means is our who, what, where, when, and the underappreciated how of making decisions. Decision making is often the most invisible part of our accidental management system. What do I mean by that? We aren't even always aware that we're making decisions and the impact that that has on the organization. As an example, I was once working for a vice president who wondered aloud, just as a thought exercise, how things might look if we had laid out the plant in a different way. For him, it was a mental exercise. For everyone else, it was a decision. A team got put together, hours of study and design took place, and after hundreds of hours of work, all for naught, when we returned to the vice president, he was surprised. Why? Because while we heard a decision, he thought he just heard a question. The point is that many of our decisions don't happen in a formal setting. They happen in an informal way, and we aren't even always aware that we're making the decisions as part of our system. We're going to look at the who of decision making. When companies do get specific about the who, this is usually where we start and often end, meaning that we define the who and then allow that person to make up the rest as they see fit. Now, this is often the biggest challenge when we start to look at the lean lens, because a lean decision for the who is putting the decision in the hands of the person closest to the point of activity, the person who's most likely to have the information needed. Now, we might say that person doesn't have the skill or the decision criteria in order to make the decision, but then we solve for that gap by giving them the skill or the criteria. The non-lean way is to remove the decision from that person and allow someone else with a skill to do so. The problem with this is we've now introduced a handoff, and that handoff introduces the opportunity for filtering, for delay, and for error. And so the lean model is put the decision in the hands of the person closest to the point of activity. But at the very least, you can't be a lean organization without defining clearly the who of each decision. As we look at the what, when, and where of the decision, we're really talking about the mechanics. As we talk about the mechanics, we start to see the decision as part of a process. What that means is there's things that feed in as inputs, and there's outputs that come out the other side to serve customers. As we see it as part of a process flow, we can start to ask questions that understand not just the decision, but how it fits as part of that flow. What are the inputs? When will that information be available? How often does a decision need to be made? Who are the customers that need to know the answer? How will this be communicated to them in a timely manner, and when do they really need to know it? And most importantly, how can we do all of that in as waste-free a manner as possible? When we see the mechanics of the decision as part of a flow with suppliers and customers at either end, we can better design it to fit those needs. The how of our decision making is actually the biggest opportunity to leverage lean as we start to improve our process. Why? Because the how of our decision making is a great opportunity to introduce some lean methods and thought processes. Fundamentally, it becomes key to delegation. How do I know how someone will make a decision? I need to know that before I delegate, and the best way I know that is to define the how. So having a standard for how we make a decision allows me to trust and allows me to delegate. This also means that we have to define and have high agreement about the process of making a decision. Is it consensus? Is it input driven? Is it done through experimentation? What is our how? An example is Koch Industries, who has what they call the challenge process. The decision owner is still clearly defined, but they are expected to reach out to their boss, their peers, their directs, and be challenged on the decision that they're making. And then they have the right to own that decision. So what helps is that there is a clear how defined by a process that allows that to go through. When we start to look at things like decision rules, do we have a standard? Do Do we have job aids? Do we have clear criteria for how we make that decision? For example, I have 4 criteria that I use to make any decision about the work that I choose to do and that which I don't. Those 4 criteria affect the questions that I ask and ultimately affects what I say yes to and what I say no to. It provides me a standard for having consistent outcomes for making those decisions. So ultimately, we need a how. And when we start to work on the process of the how and have high agreement on how that decision gets made, now we have some consistency and we really start to build deliberate and consistent performance through our decision making.